Hello and welcome to World Konnect, your weekly window to the world, a global picture of our times. Let's start the ball rolling with the focus of the show. North Korea claims to have successfully tested another nuclear weapon. This is the fifth and most powerful test. State media says North Korea can produce a variety of smaller, lighter and diversified nuclear warheads of higher strike power. East Asia Summit in Laos PDR emphasizes the importance of advancing nuclear disarmament, non-proliferation and peaceful uses of nuclear energy as mutually reinforcing pillars. UNICEF report says that around 50 million children are forced to move from their homes due to conflict. Most of them are from Afghanistan and Syria. German Chancellor Angela Merkel's party loses a local election in her home state. Voters don't seem to be backing her open-door migrant policy. Anti-immigrant alternative for Germany, AfD wins. Federal polls are due next year. Trump praises Putin, preferring him to Barack Obama. Democrats call the remarks unpatriotic. His supporters believe he intends to work more closely with Russia to defeat ISIS. North Korea sparked tensions and worries not only in the region but the world over after it conducted its fifth nuclear test, the biggest of them all. The test also left the world community shocked, as it is said to be much bigger than the expected capacity of the isolated Asian nation, known for its leaders' eccentric behavior. North Korea's state TV said the North was now capable of mounting nuclear warheads on ballistic rockets. It said no leakage of nuclear material had occurred in the test and that there was no environmental impact. The US Geological Survey and the European agencies measured the quake with a magnitude of 5.3. Agencies in China, recluse of North Korea's main diplomatic ally, also recorded the tremor. Isolated and aggressive North Korea conducted its fourth nuclear explosion in January and followed it up with a series of missile tests despite severe United Nations sanctions. Neighbors Japan and South Korea reacted sharply over the test, calling it unacceptable and a threat to the region's security. China also slammed North Korea and expressed concern. The UN Security Council has agreed to begin drawing up new sanctions against North Korea over its latest nuclear test. While US underlined the need to bring Pyongyang to the negotiation table, Russia warned of the steps that could further escalate tension.
This is yet another brazen breach of the resolutions of the Security Council. For the fifth time in recent years, the DPRK alone has broken the international norm against a nuclear test. This unacceptable act endangers peace and security in the region.
Our hope is that ultimately we can get back to the talks. We're prepared to go back right away. All Kim Jong-un has to do is say, I'm prepared to talk about denuclearization. But unfortunately, he takes the exact opposite tack.
I'm convinced that by condemning those dangerous exploits of the North Korean government, we must refrain from steps that could lead to a further escalation of tensions and put this region on the verge of, we may say, armed opposition.
The 18-member East Asia Summit reaffirmed their support to promote nuclear disarmament and nuclear non-proliferation. They underlined the importance of nuclear security to combat nuclear terrorism at national, regional and global levels. Prime Minister Modi sent out a strong message to Pakistan against sponsoring terror, calling upon the international community to isolate Islamabad and impose sanctions against it.
The Association of Southeast Asian Nations and East Asia Summit meetings that took place this week in the Laos PDR brought together heads of state and government of the 10 ASEAN and 18 East Asia Summit participating countries. They discussed issues like the South China Sea, threat of North Korea missile tests, refugees, counter-terrorism and climate change. The ASEAN countries, the US and China reaffirmed the importance of maintaining peace, stability, security and freedom of navigation in and over flight in the South China Sea. The East Asia Summit, the region's biggest political meeting, is held every year on the sidelines of and alongside the 10-country ASEAN meeting. In its final declaration, the East Asia Summit emphasized on the importance of advancing nuclear disarmament, non-proliferation, and peaceful uses of nuclear energy as mutually reinforcing pillars. It urged North Korea to abandon its nuclear and ballistic missile programs in complete, verifiable, and irreversible manner and uphold its international legal obligations, calling for the full implementation of all relevant UN Security Council resolutions and sanctions. India is a founding member of the EAS and has been a strategic partner of ASEAN since 2012. In his address at the 14th India-ASEAN Summit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi made a second wheeled reference to Pakistan's export of terrorism in a week and asked for a coordinated response at various levels to counter the menace.
Rising export of terror, growing radicalization through ideology of hatred, and spread of extreme violence define the landscape of common security threats to our societies. The threat is local, regional, and transitional at the same time. Our partnership with ASEAN seeks to craft a response that relies on coordination, cooperation, and sharing of experiences at multiple levels.
Prime Minister Modi held several bilateral meetings on the sidelines of the summits, including with US President Barack Obama. This was President Barack Obama's last major visit to Asia before he demits office in January next year. He also became the first sitting US president to visit Laos on a 4-day trip. The 3-day meeting came to a close with Laos handing over the rotating chairmanship to the Philippines, whose president was in the news for his unsavory remarks about the US president. President Duterte later apologized. The Philippines has unveiled the theme for the next year's summits, Partnering for Change, Engaging the World.
G20 leaders met in Hangzhou, China on the 4th and 5th of September. At a time when global economic recovery is slower than desirable, they adopted the Hangzhou Consensus, which emphasized on new drivers of growth and opening up new horizons for development. They pledged greater integration, openness and inclusiveness in their economies and recognized that in the long run, innovation is a key driver of growth. And to achieve innovative ecosystems, the G20 pledged to support dialogue and cooperation on a wide range of domains, with science and technology innovation at its core. The G20 communique also addressed issues related to more efficient global economic and financial governance and creating robust international trade and investment. The Hong Kong legislative elections saw many pro-independence candidates winning seats. The election saw a record turnout in the Chinese-controlled city, and the result is likely to further strain ties with Communist Party rulers in Beijing. What's more is that Hong Kong's pro-democracy lobby continued to retain over a third of the seats, allowing them to veto major legislation and check China's influence.
2 years after thousands of protesters stormed the streets of Hong Kong demanding political reforms and more say in elections, the city's Legislative Council is welcoming a new breed of young pro-democracy faces. The elections, the first after 2014's umbrella movement, saw voters coming out in record numbers. The election saw many bold and enthusiastic contestants, many of them more radical and more confrontational towards Beijing, seeking self-determination or more independence for Hong Kong. According to reports, around 5 such candidates have been elected for the Legislative Council. Beijing was obviously not pleased by the results. It is said that there have been strong signals from the mainland that any independence activities will not be tolerated. But that has hardly deterred activists.
I still believe that we still have to be united in order to have a stronger power to fight against the Communist Party. So one of my hope is that actually we could try to work together for those who uphold self-determination and those stand for the democratic values.
What we hope to achieve is to do our best to put a barrier between Hong Kong and the invisible hand of Beijing so that it cannot intervene with Hong Kong's autonomy and freedom. But when this barrier cannot hold, we will need to try to separate.
The pro-democracy opposition as a whole improved its performance in the 70-member Legislative Council. It won 30 seats, more than 27 previously, above the required numbers for blocking a bill. Hong Kong is ruled by China under one country, two systems policy, since it was handed over to Beijing in 1997 by Britain. The agreement promised a high degree of autonomy, but ultimate authority lies with Beijing. Many nascent pro-self-determination leaders say Hong Kongers must get to decide their future course on their own in 2014 when the handover pact expires. For China, any idea even closer to independence is totally unacceptable. The message was made clear during polls as well, when some candidates were barred from contesting polls and others were asked to sign a pledge that Hong Kong is an inalienable part of China. The poll results definitely do not change anything as far as Beijing's grip over the city, and pro-China parties continue to enjoy majority in the council. But the election also shows that pro-Hong Kong sentiment has been gaining ground rapidly and is set to spread further.
The United States and Russia have agreed on a plan to impose a ceasefire in the Syrian civil war and lay the foundation of a peace process. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry made this announcement along with Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov after a day of marathon talks in Geneva. Kerry said he believed the plan would lead to talks to stop the conflict and resume movement towards a negotiated peace and a political transition in Syria. Kerry said that the truce would come into force on Monday and that if it lasted a week, the United States would begin cooperation with Russian forces to target the al-Nusra Front and Islamic State groups. Earlier this week, there was a chemical attack with fingers immediately being pointed at the Assad regime. The Syrian government rejected claims and promised to cooperate with any investigation regarding the same by the United Nations.
The fighting in Aleppo intensified this week, with scores of civilians being treated for breathing problems. Helicopters had also dropped barrel bombs on the area the next day. As a rebel-held area came under chemical attack, fingers immediately were pointed to the Syrian government for using deadly gases to make the opposition surrender. The Syrian government has denied use of poisonous gases and has also expressed readiness to cooperate with the Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons to investigate such crimes. Less than a month back, a joint investigation by the United Nations and the Global Chemical Weapons Watchdog found that Syrian government troops were responsible for 2 toxic gas attacks, a claim rejected by President Bashar al-Assad's regime. The UN war crimes investigators have also said claims of chemical attacks are being verified.
Let me add that the more recent reports on the use of chlorine are disturbing, and the OPCW will use every possible information to inquire about those allegations, and will submit, the fact-finding mission of the OPCW will submit its conclusions to the states parties.
Tuesday's chemical attack had put a lot of civilians at risk. More than 100 people were hospitalized and treated after suffering from severe suffocation. A number of children were also affected and were seen breathing through respirators. Syria has been embattled by a 5-year-old battle, due to which thousands have been killed and close to 11 million people have been displaced.
A UNICEF report says that around 50 million children are forced to move from their homes due to conflict. Around 28 million of them are from Afghanistan and Syria.
The image of 3-year-old Aylan Kurdi's body washed up by the sea on a beach, and the visual of 5-year-old Omran Dakhnish sitting in an ambulance covered in blood, bewildered and startled, has shook the world out of its complacency over the plight of child refugees. These images don't just talk about 2 little kids affected by the horrors of war and civil unrest, but they speak about the lives of 50 million children worldwide who are uprooted from their homes, fleeing war, natural calamities and poverty. According to the latest UNICEF report, around 28 million of them are forced to move from their homes due to conflict, and most of the children are from Afghanistan and Syria. Children are the most vulnerable population in conflict situations, and as migrants, with weak physiques and unformed minds scarred by violence, they easily fall prey to exploitation, trafficking and crime networks. Most of the children in conflict zones are also left on their own, separated from their families, in search of better lives, forced to flee their place of origins, unwanted in their new homes. The refugees have a tough life. Children grow up with suddenly having to move, not knowing what is in store for them in future. Memories of a happy past, trying to cope with the scary, terrifying present, fearful of the uncertain future. The plight of thousands of such refugees from war-torn countries is now a big question mark. The UNICEF report now points to 6 specific actions that will protect and help displaced, refugee and migrant children. They include protecting child refugees and migrants from exploitation and violence, ending detention of children seeking refugee status, a main point to ensure that their families are together. Ensuring education and access to quality health care is another must listed out. The countries taking in the refugees must also promote measures to combat xenophobia, discrimination and marginalization. Migration is one of the biggest challenges faced by the global community today. The children, with no fault of theirs, should at the very least be given hope for a future, something that would in part at least justify all the travails of today.
Donald Trump prefers Vladimir Putin's style of leadership to that of the US President Barack Obama. He has time and again praised the Russian leader, much to the annoyance of his opponents, who are now claiming his remarks as anti-national.
It was just another addition in a series of fiery statements of US Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump is known for. Trump once again showered heaps of praise over Russian President Vladimir Putin, even calling him a better leader than US President Barack Obama. At a televised commander-in-chief forum that paired him with Democrat Hillary Clinton in separate appearances, Trump said,
"I've already said he's really very much of a leader. The man has very strong control over a country. He has been a leader far more than our president has been a leader."
Trump has been quite generous in praising Putin in past as well. His refusal to adopt the GOP's hardline against Putin has become a source of discomfort for the Republicans. His appreciation was not a one-way traffic. Putin too described Trump as colorful and talented. The romantic verbal chemistry is shaping given the fact that US and Russia share an uneasy and tense relationship. President Barack Obama warned US people of Trump's outright wacky ideas.
And I think the most important thing for the public and the press is to just listen to what he says and follow up and ask questions about what appear to be either contradictory or uninformed or outright wacky ideas.
Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton was more vocal in her attack on Trump and termed his remarks as scary and dangerous. She said,
He praised Russia's strongman Vladimir Putin, even taking the astonishing step of suggesting he prefers the Russian president to our American president. This is not just unpatriotic, it's not just insulting to the office and the man who holds the office. It is scary, it is dangerous.
Trump's comments caused some uneasy moments for his Republican colleagues. His pro-Russia stance brought under scrutiny the ties between Paul Manafort, Trump's campaign manager at the time, and pro-Russian interests. Already struggling to defend his venomous rhetoric, Republicans lacked words to justify his praise for a leader seen as America's primary foe, and calling him better than President Obama. Some believe that Trump's positive remark towards Putin may have policy implications as well. Trump has repeatedly said he wants to work more closely with Russia to defeat so-called Islamic State, and has also said he would consider lifting sanctions and recognizing its annexation of Crimea.
Thousands of people will gather in New York City, Washington, D.C. and Shanksville, Pennsylvania on Sunday as a mark of respect to those who were killed in September 11, 2001 World Trade Center attacks, known as the 9/11 attacks. They will remember the nearly 3,000 people killed when hijacked jetliners crashed into the World Trade Center, the Pentagon and a field in Pennsylvania on that fateful day. In New York City, a ceremony will take place at the 9/11 Memorial. 15 years on, mourners will gather as they have every year since the attack for the annual reading of victims' names from both the 1993 and 2001 attacks on the World Trade Center. And coinciding with the 15th anniversary of one of the worst attacks on America's history, Ari Fleischer, the press secretary of the former president George W. Bush, is releasing a unique account of notes. The notes are handwritten on a legal pad and provide a verbatim account of the shock, pain and grim determination aboard Air Force One on September 11, 2001. Scribbled by Fleischer, there are 6 pages in all, the only original verbatim text of what Bush said on Air Force One as he and his senior aides absorbed the news. Fleischer adopted a role of presidential note-taker on Air Force One on the day that remade Bush's presidency. German Chancellor Angela Merkel, whose Conservative Party lost significant ground to the anti-immigrant Alternative for Germany AfD party in a regional election on Sunday, has struck a defiant tone in a speech to Parliament. She insisted that the influx of hundreds of thousands of migrants would not cut the benefits for Germans, as some had feared.
All of us should realize the AFD is a challenge not only for the Christian Democrats, even though their leaders are happily claiming as much as are others who are taking on the message despite knowing better, but that they are a challenge for everyone in this house.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel hit back at critics of her open-door migrant policy after her conservative CDU party suffered a humiliating defeat in a regional vote. Most shocking was the defeat coming from Merkel's home state. In the weekend vote, the anti-immigrant Alternative for Germany, AfD, stole voters from all parties and mobilized many people who had previously not voted. It encashed in fears about the influx of around 1 million migrants to Germany last year. The election in the eastern state of Mecklenburg-Vorpommern saw AfD pushing Merkel's Christian Democrats into third place. The election loss for Merkel comes at a time when federal polls are just a year away and she is expected to stand for a fourth term. Founded in 2013, AfD is now represented in 9 of Germany's 16 states and has bright chances of entering the lower house of parliament, Bundestag, next year. It is also projected to perform well in an election in the city of Berlin on September 18th.
It is a very clear signal, and I say this with conviction. We want to govern this country and we will persistently follow the path, step for step, until we get there.
Voters already punished Merkel in 3 state elections in March, voting in favor of the AfD and rejecting Merkel's Christian Democrats. Even conservatives who feel they have a lock on power after ruling the country for 47 of the last 65 years are blaming Merkel's pro-refugee stance for their mounting losses. But unfazed by the election blows and criticism, Merkel staunchly defended her refugee policy and vowed to win back the trust of her voters. Amid growing concerns about security following 2 violent attacks carried out by refugees, Merkel assured that her government will do everything humanly possible to ensure people's safety. Despite many analysts predicting that the CDU's poor performance could signal the beginning of the end of Merkel's decade-long reign, her rating improved in a poll, asking whom people would choose as chancellor if they could vote for them directly.
Pope Francis on Sunday proclaimed Mother Teresa of Calcutta a saint of the Roman Catholic Church, 19 years after her death. Thousands of pilgrims gathered in St. Peter's Square in Vatican to witness her elevation to join the Church's more than 10,000 saints. Honoring the Nobel Peace Laureate who worked in the slums of Kolkata, Pope Francis said, "For Mother Teresa, mercy was the salt which gave flavor to her work and the light which shone in the darkness of the many who no longer had tears to shed for their poverty and suffering." And now let's take a look at some other stories that are making news around the world. This is a story based on the theme of One Life, One Direction. More than 40 children, whose lives are not so smooth sailing, are part of a group that provides them with some hope in a unique Sunday experience. The aim is to make them feel wanted and to give their lives purpose. This is a story from Rwanda.
Street children in Kigali have a reason to rejoice on Sundays. Smile Sunday gives them the much-needed guidance, an opportunity to better themselves. With rising concerns about children being pushed towards drugs and crime at a young age, Amani Pacific, along with his colleagues, aims to give them a reason to smile.
To know they are not alone, there's someone who care about them. Because right now we don't help with a big thing, but when they come here, we love, we share stories. They take us like they are brothers. Even right now, they call us the teachers. We are the teachers of them. They see like we give something they need in their life.
The group members gather together, eat together, and share their experiences. For these children whose lives are not smooth sailing as they face the daily challenges of street life, this gathering gives them a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, and most importantly, hope.
Smile Sunday is a good program. We can share our experiences on the streets and make new friends. Our mentors here tell us to have a vision of our life and work towards achieving it. We dance together and do many sports here. So when we go back to the streets, we are still a team and reminding each other of our goals.
More than 40 children come to this group every Sunday. Amani's vision of making them feel wanted has now grown to make a purposeful change in their lives. The next step for the organization is to ensure education of these kids. One Life, One Direction now wants to enroll them in regular schools. One more reason for the kids to rejoice.
And that concludes this edition of World Konnect. Do send us your feedback. You can write to us. Our email ID is worldkonnect.ddnews@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Facebook and now keep in touch with our Twitter handle, which is at World Konnect DD. That's World Konnect with a K. And we leave you now with some images of China's spectacular gala performance for the global leaders of the G20 summit that concluded in Hangzhou.